Hi guys, my name is HB and welcome to the 4th episode of Just the Tip. Today's video is going to be a short one where I briefly discuss recoil control on console. Quite a few of you guys have messaged me about this, asking if I have any tips or tricks or advice about how to manage recoil better on console controllers. Now, I try very hard to make sure that this channel remains platform transparent, because I literally cannot think of a more ridiculous argument than the whole console versus PC bullshit. So I hope my PC subs can still enjoy this video and maybe learn a thing or two, and that my console subs can take away a few tips. If you watched my aim assist video, you might remember that I went into quite a bit of detail regarding the science behind aiming with a mouse versus a controller. The short version of that is that aiming with a mouse is far easier and far more intuitive than aiming with an analog stick. But we all knew that by now. This obviously makes recoil management easy on PC as well. Pulling down a mouse using your whole hand, wrist and arm to stabilize your gun's reticle is much easier and more precise than doing so with just your thumb, while the controller as a whole might be moving around a bit at the same time. Now please don't think that I'm insinuating that PC gamers need less skill. Recoil management is an advanced skill on any platform. I'm merely pointing out that a mouse is far more intuitive and physically easier to use when making precise movements. However, if like me you are an avid console gamer, all is not lost. It is certainly possible to control your recoil using your analog sticks, and in today's video I will show you how. I am certainly not a pro with recoil management yet, but I do practice it quite a bit, so I hope you guys can learn something today. As always, I would love to hear from you guys if you have any other recoil management tips for console or PC. Sharing is caring. Now, the main core difference between a mouse and an analog stick is sensitivity and how that relates to surface area and movement. To try and replicate how an analog stick limits movement, try and imagine building a small box barely bigger than your hand over your mouse that stops you from moving it more than a few centimeters in each direction. That is basically what is happening with an analog stick. To visualize this in reverse, you would have to extend the length of an analog stick to about half the length of a gaming mousepad, which would mean an analog stick of nearly 17 centimeters. To try and alleviate this issue, console gamers have to turn their sensitivity way up so that the small movements of the stick translates to larger, quicker movements on screen. However, this makes micro-adjusting long-range shots and staying on target in medium and close-range encounters very difficult and unforgiving. There is one more major difference between an analog stick and a mouse in terms of movement. The speed of your cursor movement is constant and only differs in speed depending on how far you have moved the stick in any direction. In other words, if you push the stick only a few millimeters in one direction and hold it there, your cursor on screen will move at a slow speed in that direction until the game's mechanics and model construction stops that movement. This is equivalent to swiping a mouse in one direction over and over in order to make a 360-degree turn. This also means that the only way to stop that movement on an analog stick is to move it back to the center position, where on a mouse, your cursor stops where and when you stop your mouse. All this info so far is going to become important in just a second, but first, let's look at the recoil behavior of guns in Battlefield 4. As usual, we'll go over to simthic.com where they've done all the hard work for us. What we want to look at in particular are the accuracy plots. Now, the Symphony creators fired 7,000 5-shot bursts in full auto while ADS for each gun, and then plotted the resulting bullet spread and recoil like you see in the graphs here. This is a great way to visualize the recoil of each gun. Important things to note are bullet spread, muzzle travel, in other words how high does the graph go, and lastly the recoil pattern, in other words does it pull left or right, does it go straight up, etc. etc. You can of course get the exact values for each gun's recoil by looking at its stats, but I like the accuracy plots for their simplicity. Now, on a PC using a mouse, you can simply train your hand and arm to draw the mouse down following the opposite pattern of what the accuracy plot's showing. So if the gun has a strong right pull, you can slowly pull your mouse down and to the left. This means your cursor will stay in the same spot on target. The only thing that will still cause some bullet deviation is the bullet spread, which increases the longer you hold down the trigger. On a console controller, however, you cannot continuously pull back on the stick the whole time you are firing, because the further you move the stick, the faster your crosshair starts moving. Instead, you need to find out at which point your cursor speed matches the climb of the gun's muzzle and hold the stick in that exact position. Both on PC and console, these techniques require hours and hours of practice before you start seeing the positive results. This is because recoil management is part feel and part muscle memory. Let's look at a few examples of this. I'm on the test range with my trusty M416. I'm running a suppressor and an angled grip. Let's fire at this wall going ADS but not doing anything to combat the recoil. You can see my right thumb is not touching the stick, so the gun's muzzle climbs quite a bit and slightly to the right, which we knew it would do from looking at the simthic.com plots. Now this time I'm going to try and counter that recoil. So again, I'm going to try and find that sweet spot on the stick's back pull where the downward speed of my cursor perfectly counters the gun's recoil. Okay, so right there you can see me overcompensating on the stick, and I get punished quite badly for it. Those 5 or 6 shots that went completely low would have probably cost me my life in a firefight. Let's try and do it right this time. There you go. You can see my grouping is much tighter, the cursor barely moves during the mag dump, and if that were an enemy, he would have been properly hosed down. I'm gonna head back to the target range and show you guys the difference recoil management can make while we listen to some lovely yodeling. Enjoy. Okay, so you can see the massive difference in successful hit markers you will get if you learn to control your recoil. Now you guys would have noticed that I use stick extenders on my controller. I personally swear by stick extenders if you want to enjoy consistent FPS gameplay on a console. Depending on the length you choose, they can effectively double your stick length, giving you more control over micro adjustments. I also feel like my thumbs are in a much more comfortable position while using them. I have only ever used extenders from Control Freaks, whom I'll link down below. These extenders are also tournament legal as far as I know. By using these extenders, I can put my sensitivity quite high while maintaining control at all ranges. Here are my current sensitivity settings if you guys are interested. I only turn my extreme long range sensitivity down a bit to allow for those tiny adjustments on the odd occasion where I snipe long range. Lastly, I would like to make it clear that mag dumping as I did in this video is not really the way to go. I simply use it as an example so you guys can see the reticle's movement a bit better. Although there are times where a good mag dump works perfectly well, you should not make a habit of it. Burst firing your gun is by far the best way to guarantee quick, consistent kills. The problem with bursting is that the length of the burst you can pull off depends very much on the gun you're using, which makes it hard to put it in video. My rule of thumb is to give 10 to 12 round bursts for very stable guns like the AK5C or the SAR-21, and 5 to 7 round bursts for guns that have a bit more kick. Now, although you suffer the first shot recoil multiplier for every new burst, it is a small price to pay for the decrease in bullet deviation, which will result in more shots hitting your target. On console, bursting is very important, especially at longer ranges. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Just the Tip. I really hope you guys enjoyed it and hopefully learned something as well. Like I said at the start of the video, please share your personal tips on recoil management, bursting, etc. on PC and console in the comment section. As always, if you guys enjoyed this content, please hit those like and share buttons, and if you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe as well. Remember to follow me on Twitter for more up-to-date info on the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.